Great, welcome everyone. There's a few people just still trickling in, so we'll just give it a moment or two before we get started. But feel free to turn your videos on. It's so nice to see people's faces in these settings. No pressure to, but it's nice to see a face. Feel free to use the chat and introduce yourself. It's nice to know who's here, and we will get started in a moment. Before everyone came on, we were talking about nice things that had happened in our day. So if you've got anything that you want to share, feel free. Nice cup of coffee, the kookaburras going off. That was something we heard.
Country, lovely.
Yeah, if you want to put where you're dialing in from, that'd be lovely as well. It's nice to see a few familiar faces. I can see Sharon and Karen, a few familiar names. What do you reckon, Lauren? Shall we get started and people can just come in as they come in?
Let's do it.
Great. Let's just pin the chat so I can see a little bit. Well, welcome everybody. It's so nice to see you all on a Wednesday evening, and also welcome to those people who've sent beautiful apology letters saying I really want to watch it, but I'll watch the recording. So it's wonderful to have you listening from wherever you are and whatever time you're listening. So I'm Millie Rooney. I'm the National Coordinator for Australia reMADE, and it is my great pleasure to get to be moderating this conversation this evening. If you want captions, we have enabled captions, so you can choose that on the bottom of your screen. If you have any trouble with that, Irene is the person to ask in the chat. So, like I said, I'm Millie, and I'm really thrilled to be working on this collaboration with the Women's Health Goulburn Northeast on this conversation series. And it's just been such a pleasure for me to discover an organisation filled with incredibly smart, incredibly strategic, really fun and really kind people. So if you've come to this event through the Australia reMADE networks or otherwise, I really encourage you to check out Women's Health Goulburn Northeast, even though it's a mouthful to say when you're moderating an event run by them. And so, Australia reMADE is really about the vision of where we can be, what our collective yes is, and also, well, what's the structural change that needs to happen to get us there? And the Women's Health Organisation, to me, is a real example of what that looks like on the ground, grounded in community. So we've got Irene is your tech support, and Lauren is going to be monitoring the chat for questions. I'll get to a little bit more of that in a moment, but this conversation is the second conversation in a series based around the idea of caring, connection, and contribution. And these 3 C's come from some work that I did with Australia reMADE, where we asked people, well, what is it that you want for your communities? What is it that you want for you and your communities? And we heard some really interesting things. We heard that people want housing, healthcare, education, access to jobs, access to nature, and access to the internet. But more importantly, we heard that people wanted the infrastructure and the capacity to care and be cared for. We ran the first conversation on that, to connect with people in place and to contribute both locally and nationally. So we wanted to know, well, what would it look like to put care and connection and contribution at the centre of our decision making? And that's really what this series is about. Last month, we talked about care with Beth Thornburg, Anna Greta Hunter and Matt Grogan, talking about, well, why is care important and why might we want to reimagine it in our communities? And some key things that emerged from that conversation were this idea of throw back your babies. If you're fishing in the river, throw back the babies so the people downstream can have fish that have grown. That was a really important theme, and thinking about expanding our boundaries of care. Valuing care as a policy choice and not just a personal problem. And recognising time as an essential care infrastructure. And this month, we're talking about connection. We heard a lot in the work that I did on people wanting places where the coffee is free, where you can connect in without having to pay for it, where you can belong without having to fit in, and common places and spaces to be together. So we're here tonight to talk about why connection matters how we can do it better, and what kind of infrastructure we need for it. And with that in mind, I want to acknowledge that I am down here on Muwinina country in Lutruwita, Tasmania, and that I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. And I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call today. And we talk about connection. I want to acknowledge the extraordinary connection and the ongoing connection that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to this country that we now call Australia. And a type of connection that results in deep care for place, deep care for culture. And through time, more than 60,000 years. I can't imagine being so deeply connected to place and history in that way. And that this has continued vibrantly through the trauma of colonization and the ongoing challenges of that. And, I wanted to acknowledge it's yet again been a really difficult week in that space. And to say that, what would it look like for us to be truly connected to each other, to our history, to place, and how could we change the way that we connect and live with each other so that we can have a future where we can all fit and recognise the stories and the trauma of the past. So I hope that tonight we can expand how we think about connection and that we can learn from these three brilliant speakers about how to put these expanded ideas into practice in a way that challenges us and acknowledges that really deep connection. So our three brilliant panellists, we've got Dr. Millie, Jasper Peach and Amanda Kelly. And for those of you who are hoping to see Judy Horacek tonight, unfortunately, all we've got is her print on my water mug. She sends her really deep apologies. She's had to go and connect with her family because of important things going on. So we hope that we'll bring her into a conversation at another point. So I'm going to introduce our panelists properly. Like I said, there's captions if you need to use them. Please feel free to use the chat and engage as we go. Even if we're not reading it as panelists, it's nice to see that there's life out there and we're not talking into the abyss. It's always difficult to moderate over Zoom, so please put your videos on, wave your arms, waggle your eyebrows, frown deeply, go into thinker pose, whatever it is to give us some feedback would be an amazing form of connection. But if you need to have your camera off, that is also fine. And we will definitely have time for questions. So if you can, you feel free to pop questions in the chat as we go, and we'll also ask for them at the end. So our wonderful speakers. We've got, like I said, Dr. Millie, who is a Trawulawoi woman of Tebrikana country in northeast Tasmania, Australia. She's an associate professor in Indigenous leadership with the Swinburne University of Technology, and her research fields over the last 25 years have focused on Indigenous affairs in land and sea, management policy and governance of Australian regulatory environments. Australia reMADE's actually chatted with Emma before, and I'm just fascinated and inspired by her radical love approach that she takes to working with people, and particularly with some of the more conservative governments that we have on this island. So I'm looking forward to talking to you in a moment, Emma. We've got Jasper Peach, who is a trans, non-binary and disabled writer, speaker and editor from Jara country. They're passionate about equitable access and inclusion, focused around the dismantling of misplaced shame via storytelling. And their first book, a collection of advice and encouragement for new and prospective queer parents, will be released in March 2023. And I've followed Jasper in the online world for a little while now, and I'm really excited, Jasper, to hear more from you in more ways than just little tweets. So that's quite exciting to have you here. And then our third speaker is Amanda Kelly, who is the CEO of Women's Health Goulburn Northeast and has spent most of her life working for the non-profit sector. And she's always finding connections between the way we live, work and are in the world. And in her current role, she gets to focus on the long-term systemic changes that we need to consider if we want to create a life that is full of meaning for all of us. And Amanda participated in some of the early work with Australia reMADE, and has this real ability to connect big picture systems thinking to on the ground work. And I'm so excited that we get to keep working together. So with those awesome introductions, we've got an hour. I wish we had 3 hours and a cup of coffee, but we've got an hour. So let's get into it. So Emma, I like to to speak, just noting there's an interesting topic, but there's only one male on the call. That's fantastic. Gender is whoever you are. Just be here. That's wonderful and great. So Emma, I've heard you speak and talk about revolutionary love, and that as an active approach to building bridges and relationships and connection. And you've had a bit of success down here in Tasmania with the Conservative government, which is quite interesting. I think you don't often think Conservative government like radical love. It's not two things that fit together naturally in my mind. And you said things like all people are humans with connections to people and place. Like, I just love your thoughts on connection and the importance of that, and understanding that in helping us achieve the world that we want to live in.
Thank you, dearest Millie. Hello, everyone. So lovely to look at you, my brothers and sisters. How wonderful to be here. Coming to you from Player Hickey-Illaplu country in northwest Tasmania, but my country, Tabuquina country, is up in the northeast, to pay my respects to ancestors, our communities, our created beings, gave us wonderful lands and waters and airs, night sky that we all benefit from. Okay, love. I'm Tasmanian Aboriginal, and so when I was born, I wasn't considered human. Most of us have grown up with the knowledge, taught in schools that Tasmanian Aboriginal people got wiped out, on the death of our magnificent countrywoman, Truckanini, and us as a peoples were declared extinct. And so when I was born, I was non-human. I had no identity, and I was denied it. I was actively told I was wrong to be Tasmanian Aboriginal. It is such a crazy circumstance to have people stand in front of you saying that you are not real, right? And how my peoples in particular, are not a screaming heap on the ground going, but, and actually having families and jobs and, continuing with rights. It's just extraordinary story. And so for me, history books and this outsized global view about who we are. I mean, honestly, our experience in the mid-1940s, Mr. Raphael Lemkin used us and Jewish people to help coin the term genocide, and so type A babies, right? And H.G. Wells, when he wrote War of the Worlds, actually writes, in his introduction, this is a metaphor, who are we to complain about the Martians? I mean, look what we did to the Tasmanians, right? And so to sort of exist as this Gothic enterprise of look at what the worst that humanity can do, but at the same time being neutral. Well, we don't actually want to hear from you, right? Just shut up, right? You don't exist. Just shut up. It's insane. It's just insane. And so this thing of seeing yourself as this place of unbelonging. And if you did, well, you're just so awful that, you just deserve to die, right? There is this history of hate. It's so easy to believe in that about yourself. It's so easy when you're getting it every day. Oh, every day. And yet, as an Aboriginal woman, elders around us, I know love. I know it. Love for community, love for country, love for elders, love for who we are. How do you put these two together? For me, this was just going, having the same old arguments doesn't work. Engaging in the same grounds, seeing the same people in the same way. So I just thought, I'm going to come at it as a bit of a surprise. Thank you for your genocide. Thank you for your exile. Thank you for your dispossession. We love you. Because we get so bogged down in arguing the nuance of, oh, well, it wasn't really genocide, it was massacre. You know, I'm like, oh, God. Sorry, details. Tomato, tomato. That we're not actually digging deep into what it means to love. I have a love of country, and for country to love you back. And so some of the loneliest people were some of the most extraordinary white male leaders that we don't honestly think of in deserving love and compassion, because they're not allowed to. One of the things about Western society is that you've always got to have an answer. Western society has taught us that to erase indigeneity, practices and protocols and cultures and mode of colonisation, to fill that void, you must always speak. You must always have a justification. You must always have a narrative. You must always have an answer. And in our culture, as Aboriginal people, it's like we sit and we listen. The elders speak. It's the biggest relief. All of a sudden, I'm not asked. I have an opinion, to be a leader, to have a vision, to have a strategy, to have a plan, to fill a silent gap. And when you tell these conservative white men, you know what, it's okay, shut up. I don't want anything from you. What I would like is for us to join together on country so that the pressure is taken off you and you have a place of refuge no one can take from you. When you have a connection to country, when you know your place, and look at all your beautiful brothers and sisters, same from where you're from. It's not being appropriating culture. It's recognising that country has a place for you too. But to get connected, we have to learn from our elders. This isn't a free ride. This isn't a no strings gift. It's not something you can take. It's a process that we learn to give ourselves over. Country as a place of care and love for ourselves, so that we can then put country as central to our life and our relationships, which takes the pressure off us. We're not standing there looking at each other, trying to convince people across the room. We're actually standing all in a line looking towards country. And that makes us modest, and it gives us a sense of humility that allows us to reimagine our place in caring for country, because all of a sudden we become gentle on ourselves. I don't have to have an answer. I have to be anything. We just have to belong, have a kinship and a sense of reciprocity, and a love for all that we are. I probably should kick this off to others once you get me started on love.
Well, Emma, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm just sitting here thinking, yeah, maybe we could just turn off the Zoom and I could go and watch the rain and have a cup of tea and just think about the radical things you just said and connect with place. Like I'm not going to suggest we all actually do that, because Jess and Amanda have amazing things to say too. But What a profound start, really. And I think I'm so looking forward to hearing the others respond to that and to weaving this discussion together.
Yeah, follow that one, Jasper and Amanda.
The love, Emma. Where's the love?
Yeah. Yeah, so Jasper.
Free it.
Yeah.
Free it. I'm so up for this juicy chat.
Yeah, well, actually, so Jasper and I had a chat a few days ago before this conversation. And Jasper, one of the things that you said to me in that chat that is just like ringing in my ears is something like, you know, when I connect with people, I know who I am. And I think some of what Emma is saying is there around when we allow ourselves to connect with each other, when people are allowed to connect with place, that, you know, I think there's something in that. And that also sits in my mind with another really powerful statement someone once said to me. She was a woman with Sri Lankan heritage, and she said, I want a place where I can belong without having to fit in. And again, I think it's like that, being in place that allows you to be there, but you don't have to conform. So these ideas that we want to be ourselves, but ourselves as individuals who are connected and held by the greater whole. And I know so much of your work and your thinking in your life is around equity and inclusion. And I love that idea about narratives without shame. I thought that was a really powerful phrase. Yeah, I mean, what does connection mean for you in this context and your work and who you are and what you do?
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Emma. Oh my gosh, can we just hear it for Emma? I'd like to hang out with you for a start. I'm here in Jarrah country in Central Vic, and when my partner and I moved here, we knew this is where we wanted to have our children, and we're a queer couple. I don't subscribe to a binary gender. I have an invisible energy limiting disability, and I'm also a fat person, and that's not a negative thing to say. Everyone is a different size and shape. And when we moved here, I noticed that the landscape was upside down. The earth has been turned over and over and over to search for gold. And I think what draws people here who are not originally from this place is that we want to know what is the gold in the center of our being, who we are, what is real, what's true for us. And does it happen or what? It is just people come here and they figure out they're a different gender. They completely change careers. They break up and re-shack up with someone else, and then they renovate, and then they procreate. And there's this whole rhythm. And all the while we're looking at this upside down country that is very dry and very rocky and has all these beautiful wildflowers that thrive in the ecosystem. This country was cared for so beautifully and wholly by the First Nations people. And then a terrible thing happened of arrogance and assuming knowledge, and all of that wisdom was left behind for the Industrial Revolution, and it just destroyed so much. But there is a lot that remains, because what was woven into country here is very, very strong, and it's stronger than what has happened. But the sorrow is here too. So I think in terms of connection, it's always important to acknowledge that two opposing facts can be true at the same time. Anyone who has children, I have never been so tired, and I have never felt so much love. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't want to do anything else. You know, life is like this. These opposing facts can all coexist. We can all coexist. And to connect and to really understand each other, it's exactly what you were saying, Emma. It's about humility and compassion and listening without a need to tie a little bow at the end and make everything all neat and tidy and perfect. It's not realistic, you know. What's perfect is the mess and the different voices and the different opinions and different identities and different genders and all of it. We can coexist as long as we connect and actually hear and respect where we're all coming from. If we can be gentle and compassionate, we can know who we are. But if we march in here like old mate Cook, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well for anyone. It doesn't do anyone any favors. I think if I can listen without needing to smooth something over, that's connection. If I can sit with discomfort and be with someone in grief, that's connection. If I feel lit up and energized by hearing someone telling me the truth, that's connection. Yeah, and it's so much more, but that's the starting point.
Thank you. And I love that phrase, what's perfect is the mess. And not only because I'm the owner of a wardrobe rather than a wardrobe, but I think there's human. That's where the delight is in that messy space. Look, it's so lovely how this is all kind of connecting through. Amanda, you know, in your work with the Women's Health Goulburn Northeast, like, it is all about connection, you know, connecting ideas, connecting people with ideas, connecting people with ideas and with people. And that's something that I know is really important to you. I'd love to hear, like, sort of your responses to Jasper and Emma, and also your own kind of take on what connection is. And then I will open it up to some other sort of more themed questions. But
thanks, Millie. Yeah, so I'm on Jajawaran country, and I'm just looking out the window here, and it is wet and it is lush, and I'm just thinking about how it's going to be quite a few weeks before I can get on the tractor and mow the grass out the front. You know, it's going to, it's growing and growing and growing. And I feel I lived in the city for so much of my life, and I moved to the northeast of Victoria for my work, for this role. And I saw this role advertised and I went, that is my job. That is what I am. That is what I'm meant to be doing. And I started this journey into regional Victoria and to understand the land more. And so, you know, I guess when I was in the city, I'm thinking about what you know, what you were saying, Jasper, of, like, you know, being there but not being there. I wasn't really connected in, although I have a very functional sort of life. And I actually spent time, I couldn't connect with this land that we're in now. I found, and in Australia, I felt alien in this land. You know, go figure. But I travelled overseas. I travelled to Europe, and I spent time looking for community there, looking for people. And I spent time in intentional communities, 3 different ones over a period of about 18 months. And I spent over 6 months in Findhorn community in Scotland, which is in the northeast coast. And I found there a connection with people that I hadn't had before. There were people who really thought about sustainability, really thought about how to live with each other in a community, and having that, a boundary in the sense that this was the community that we lived in. It really highlighted for me the connections that we have with each other, and how when I do something over here, it impacts someone over there, even if they don't know that I'm doing this and I'm the impact. And in that very small space, it really highlighted that connection that we all have to each other. And when I came back home again, still living in the city, and took me a few years to move regionally, And my connection with the country is so different now. I guess I had to work through what does it mean to be part of a human community, to then understand what it's to be part of country. And that's a journey. I mean, you know, it's not something that I woke up one morning and went, oh, that's all done, thank you very much. But doing this work that I'm doing with other women and our community who are so obviously interconnected, it's really heightened that for me. So I feel, you know, Emma talked about the outsized world that we have. I just, it's amazing to understand what's happening in different parts of the world and have that connection, but it's too big. We need to localize. We need to be closer. And I think that that's been, for me, the regional experience that's happened. And particularly in this work also is, you know, there are people that are working together to make changes. We don't have all the answers, and you can't. And I think that messiness is one of the wonderful things about it. I like to call it complexity, because sometimes messiness gets a bad rap, really. And it's just like, it is messy. It's complex and it's interested and it's interconnected. So, yeah, I feel like that's, for me, the connection is we all impact each other. And even if we can't see, you know, like I've got a mobile phone, you know, and somebody around the world dug up land to help make that mobile phone, and I get that, and you know, it'd be wonderful not to have it, but this is the world we live in. It is complex and messy. So, you know, a lot of the work we do at Women's Health Goulburn Northeast is to think about those broader pieces and how can we shift them, how can we connect us better so we understand each other better and can treat each other with more kindness and more compassion, and be able to live together more in a more connected way. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Amanda. And it's so interesting to hear, you know, you were saying about the boundaries. Being in a bounded kind of space and community enables you to better connect. And I think that's so interesting, because in the care conversation we had, we really talked about, so Beth Thornburg was talking about, I think she's a Wiradjuri woman, and she was saying, you know, she finds it so bizarre that we have fence lines for national parks, and on the one side of the fence you care and on the other side you don't, and there's weirdness of boundaries. So there's an interesting thing going on there, like boundaries as really helpful and boundaries as really weird at the same time. It's speak about messy, like hello, you know, our fences is quite interesting. Some of the themes that have come up in this so far, and also in conversations that I've had with the three of you prior to this, one of the big questions I have is, you know, we talk about disconnection so often and link that with loneliness as being this sort of personal problem. Like, we'll just go and join a club, you know, we'll just go get some friends, go to the pub, you know, like we talk about it as an individual problem. How do we shift, or can we shift that story away from an individual failure, disconnection as individual failure, to a systemic problem? And what's the kind of, at Australia reMADE, we've been talking about infrastructure, and that is partly park benches and the internet and the telephone, but it's also that social and cultural enablers that we have to put in place. Yeah, I'm really fascinated if you've got any thoughts, any of you. I can see you nodding away there, Emma, about what that would look like, how we shift from that individual to that collective, and what we need to build to create that and strengthen it.
No, for me, one of the greatest tricks of our society of, you know, colonisation and capitalism is to make the term rational actor something, you know, we put on an altar of what we're meant to be, right? And, you know, oh, give me the shivers. Two, there's this sense that if you're going to care, you've got to care for everything, which I agree with caring for everything, but I don't agree with the space that it operates in. I advocate the difference between being a warrior and being an activist. And an activist, you're going to burn out. because you're going to take the rage and the problems and the injustice on the world on your shoulders, and it is going to kill you. You will get sick out of this. I mean, you know, probably Jasper and Matt, we've all probably been there, you know, wave the flag or bang the drum or protested, and what you tend to get is punctuated moments where you get attention on the issue and you get a lot of people commiserating with you. Do you actually cause change, and is it healthy for you? Because how can we have healthy relationships if we're burdened by what colonization says is, you know, this is all your responsibility? And so for me to be a warrior is about working and changing within your remit and your sphere and making that as small as you possibly can. You know, we might want huge campaigns of we're going to change everything. I don't want that, because that's not a safe space for many people. You know, we all think that people, you know, we're told we're powerless, which I don't agree with, but at the same time, we're also told that we're so powerful we can have a say over all these things. We can't. No? And so it's funny, I just say to people, what's going on in your street? What's going on in your backyard? That's it. Within your sphere of influence. So, for example, Warrior might just say, you know what, I'm going to change this street name from, you know, I mean, my hometown, you know, Main Street is a guy who killed black women. You know, I might just say, I'm going to do that. And you might write a letter to the council every week. You know, you may not make it change, but this is taking the pressure off yourself. I don't constantly being made to feel the burden and responsibility of everything. And so for me, the infrastructure is saying, what is my sphere? What's my patch? Because that's what blackfellas are. You know, we talk about country. I'm not going to speak for Jar Jar Wurrung country. And everyone respects that as our protocol. And then Western society says, yeah, but don't you do that. All right. What, fella? You've got to speak on behalf of everything. Bear that anxiety. Love your backyard. Know everything. Hey, the wind moves, it's insect there, and you will actually see change in that grass. Maybe you might want to leave it. Maybe you want to see a whole different diverse landscape. Give yourself time, because you know what? If it's not neat, oh my goodness, you're probably black trash, right? Right. Change your own narrative within your own backyard as to what is the value that I'm actually caring for, because I can give myself permission for a messy life, but I can't give myself permission for a messy yard. Right. Right. How much of it? We all do it. We all do. I better go out and prune the tree. I better do this. And what happens if that is better off for country? What happens if we change our sphere of influence to give ourselves a break and be gentle on ourselves? And so this is what a warrior is, in for the long term. And what that means is that, I don't know about Jasper working in the disability field, but you don't have to worry about others speaking on your behalf or taking that outrage on your behalf and making statements that don't actually reflect who you are. Do you find that, Jasper? Do you worry about when people get outraged and all of a sudden got to worry about you?
Outrage is just, ugh, you know.
Right.
I don't know how to spell that, but when you were speaking, Emma, I was remembering, oh gosh, let's say 2009, 2010. I've been a marriage celebrant for 17 years, and I've very recently resigned from that role. But in my time, when I started off, I thought, oh, it won't take long for marriage equality, and then it went on and on and on and on and on and on. And so I thought, what can I do? And got involved in some activism, doing illegal mass weddings on the steps of Parliament. And I think about doing that and the personal cost there was to me as someone who was quite unwell. It wasn't accessible for me, but I didn't know I could say that, because I thought, well, if I am to make change, I must give everything I can, but I gave more than I could. But you don't know the balance of that until you do. And then in 2017, when the marriage equality debate was going on, and I just want to say, it's not about gay marriage, it's about whether a large number of people are allowed to be included in ceremony and ritual. It's like, I don't even know what I like my marriage, but I don't know what I think about marriage. I think that's kind of a crock. But and I say that because I know there are so many relationships that I signed on the dotted line to solidify legally that ended up being violent, and I feel sick about that. You know, that I played any part, and not my responsibility to suss that out. But everyone has their own journey. But you know, it's not something that I need to be involved in, connecting those people in that way. So marriage equality debate was going on. We had our first child, and of course, everyone came calling. Can you come and talk on the radio about this? Can you write a thing for that? Because I'm quite outspoken, and which you might have picked up on. And I got a real bee in my bonnet about it. I was like, right, good. It's time for me to step up. And my wife looked at me and she said, I need you here. I need you here to help me. When I am breastfeeding our baby, I need you to get me a drink of water. I can't do this by myself. And so I had to zoom right in to my family who were under fire. And for the first time, we knew the opinions of our local community about who we were and the choices we made and our life. And it's none of our business what people think of us. And I hate that it came to such light. And I learned in that moment, you've got to zoom in. You've got to look at your family. And if your family is you as a single person, that is a family. Family has so many meanings. It doesn't have to be what people think it is. It's what you decide it is and feel it is. So in terms of, if I can answer the question, I mean, if it's infrastructure, I think spaciousness allows us to have presence. If there is breathing room in your life and you're not running around putting out fires or running down the street making a big speech, carrying a heavy thing, and you're doing what you can do, what you are capable of, what you have the resources to do, to also live the rest of your life and feel well. And well means all sorts of things for different people. For me, well is constantly exhausted. That's me being well. And sometimes losing my train of thought.
But it's funny. Care is this thing of care, and you know what? It's a bottomless pit. Yeah. And those who do care are then sold this bill of goods that, you know what, you're broken if you can't come through with that compact. So I never signed up for that. And one of the things that's really for me, Karl Marx, when he was writing about capital in the 1860s, right? And he said this, and he said, black fellas, I think probably used the language of natives, but you know, black fellas can't talk about them in capital because for every trade and exchange they have kinship behind that. And so they can't be separated from their labours. They can be subject to other people's attempts at it, but they can't be separated out. And so he said, I can't talk about their mob. And so what he showed in that is that kinship and reciprocity can't be bloody bought, right? And so in our society, this Western thing, we try and constantly put a value on it. And it drives us insane. It really does. And we have to stop attaching an economic value to care, because we ain't going to win out of that argument.
Emma, I'm so glad you raised that, because Jasper, again, from when we previously spoke, you said something again like, you know, it's a radical act to be safe. And I think that applies in so many different ways. And I want to come back to that in a moment. But Amanda, you know, you're quite good at putting this gender lens on things. And I think so, you know, from what you've said, Emma, about love and care for self and care for that small patch that is yours and knowing what is yours to care for. And Jasper, you talking about that personal cost and the work that you do, you know, getting your wife the water when she's breastfeeding, you know, all of these things as deep acts of connection, and the time that you have to do that is an infrastructure, you know. So often I think is a real gendered lens around connection. So I'm thinking of a friend of mine who, she had a young baby. Her husband said to her, you can't go and have a coffee. It turned out to be an abusive relationship, but you know, he would say, you can't go and have a coffee. You can't go and connect with your community. And her community was saying to her, that coffee is infrastructure for community that will help, you know, bake the biscuits, look after the kid when you're sick, you know, like that. There is work, connection is work. I'm really interested, Amanda, if you have a perspective on this in terms of how we see connection as being gendered.
Look, so often, and you know, I'm going to caveat this because, you know, not all men, but you know, not all women either. So I'm just going to caveat this, but to say in general, it's women who connect. Mm-hmm. We hold the connections in our society, but because of this need that Emma was talking about earlier, for us always to have solutions, always to act, always to do the things, the connections are not valued. And our way of valuing in our community is money. And so women are always poorer because we don't value connection, but we do all the connecting. And you know, I mean, there's that very, very clear example of what happened in Iceland when women went on strike for the day. You know, we just go, well, how does it work when you know, if women stop caring, if women stop, if we stopped doing all of those things, and we're not going to, because we're human and we, you know, we care and we want to connect. But so the gender lens on this is that connections are not valued, and so therefore women are not valued. And in our society, value means getting paid. And so, you know, we're the poor ones in there. Yet if we weren't here, you know, if we weren't doing what we're doing, we wouldn't function. And then I start to think about, well, yeah, if we didn't function in the way that we're functioning now, how would it look? What would be different about what we're doing if we actually said, well, you know, all genders, we all value connection. There's space for everyone to do the connecting. There's space for everyone to be valued in the same way. Then, I mean, that's the change. That's what we can do. You know, there's sort of that thing of, we were talking about recently, there was some research done, not just about what the amount of time that women spend caring and connecting, and I think these are very interchangeable in this sort of sense, but the emotional load of what they do. So often, you know, if you have a hetero relationship, and often he goes out and, you know, he does things, he does the maintenance in the yard, or you know, goes and fixes something, and she gets the kids ready for school and does lunches. But you know, the things that women think about in this sort of scenario are the things that are time sensitive. They need to be done. The kids need to be fed. You know, the school things need to be done. But the maintenance stuff, that can wait till the weekend, you know, and so then that can be done, and then she gets to look after the kids while those things are happening. And so, you know, there's so many layers to this that that we don't think through. So yeah. So that's how I see that gendered layer. Yeah.
So I mean, Emma and Jasper, you might have responses to that, and I'm really wary of time because we, you know, but not to rush it. So there's sort of two questions I have floating around in my head, and maybe you can just pick one. And I think the questions in the chat might bring us into this as well. I have a sort of a really pointy question, which I know you're all going to hate, so you can skip it. But is, you know, if we could change one thing, because we get asked so often, and at Australia reMADE about, you know, it's really nice to talk about care and connection and contribution, but it's a bit soft, isn't it? And, you know, as a woman championing this, well, that's a bit soft of you, Millie. So if you could change one thing, you know, one piece of change outside of you, we've talked a lot about that self stuff. What would you like to see change? So that's one of my questions. And the other question is actually, there's been quite a lot in the chat about disability and access. And I feel like that is a whole nother important kettle of fish. So I think we can probably just use a little bit of question time to go to both those places. But if someone wants to respond to one of those to start us off, if you're like, yes, we've got to talk about this, leap in.
Me, pick me.
Jasper's got their hand up.
oh, you go, Jasper.
I'll be quick, I promise. I think we need to abolish the prison system. It is nothing but the hateful, harmful colonisation bull poo. And it harms everyone.
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on something that Emma said earlier, because I knew you were going to ask this, Millie. And Emma mentioned it. We have to get rid of the global economy. We have to localise. I don't object to business. I don't object to people making money, but I do object to all of what we are calling value going into, and power essentially moving to basically 10 white blokes who use it to pop off to the moon and come back again. I mean, you know, like seriously. So, you know, we get rid of it. How do we get rid of it? We get rid of it by localising. We get rid of it by looking to our communities around us and connecting with them. And by community, I mean all community, our country, our who we are, our human and non-human, everyone around us and everything around us. We connect and we localise. And, you know, I think that's, for me, that's it. That's the answer. And get rid of the prisons. Brilliant idea. Let's do that as well.
I mean, the prisons that's a whole nother deep conversation, but I think that's an interesting and important point to raise as an act of like deep disconnection is that system. Yeah. How about you, Emma?
I mean, when you think about our culture, you know, if we think about 60,000 years, we didn't move. Didn't matter. You know, this thing about language of crisis. We're in a crisis. It's flood. We're in a crisis because of fire. These things are exacerbated, but they're not a crisis. You know, 60,000 years we've watched. You know, in Tasmania, we told the oral histories of the flooding of the Bass Strait to the whitefellas at 15,000 years old. Some of the oldest oral histories in the world. You know, to us it wasn't a crisis because we love country and country loves us. We will adapt. And so this language of crisis is about capitalising. Someone's making money out of this. Because, you know, they're not saying, well, you know, the colonisation means, oh, doesn't work, move. Sorry, you've been move. Right? And so, and this thing of consumption, when I was growing up, it wasn't a shameful factor that you'd never been to the mainland, never been to Melbourne, you know, from Tasmania. And now, you know, we have to get back to that position where, you know, that became, and then through the ages, that became laughed at. Oh, God, look at you. You've never travelled And now we need to start venerating those people who just say, this is enough for me. This is enough for me. And it's so hard because all of a sudden, everything that we've devalued in our quest for consumption has to become attractive. This is the humility that we have to learn, because colonization has told us that what you have will never be enough. Capitalism has told us this. And so we can't be healthy. We're consciously struck down with anxiety. So I actually reject these things as much as I possibly can, burdened by it the same as everyone else. It's a terrible thing to unlearn. It really is, you know, and even these things, these issues, you know, I mean, it's funny because I've got a little bit of a different idea about gender. You know, we have to value women's business, which is quite different from men's business, which is quite different from everyone's business. You know, for me, that's a hell of a community that I belong to in terms of women's business. And it's not about the task. It's about who we are as women or men or everyone together when we're in those environments. And so women's business is so completely devalued in our society because, hey, guess what? We care. You can't put a price on that. So therein lies the deviance. And so we make women's business stronger. I just say, you know, quite counterintuitively, more of that. Because then things like the concept of disability disappears, or I've written in the comment, just becomes part of you. Most Aboriginal people have got some sense of, you know, we don't have perfect bodies. Rather than see that as a deficit, it just becomes a characteristic. We don't care about your disability. We care about you. And so we're not framed up by these things. That's where country and our connection to country gives us a little bit of freedom. Move away from these constructs. Back ourselves, to be gentle on ourselves, my darling sisters. Be gentle on yourself. Love who you are. Right? Become untouchable. Yeah, so Emma, do you think people who live in city don't love this country? I think absolutely they do. I have compassion for them because I have absolute compassion for people who live in cities because their drive is to make a world a better place, but it's through this lens of capitalism that has sold them a really shitty bill of goods. No, we love our cities. These are places of people and connection. But at the same time, we see the most immense amount of loneliness. There's something is very, very wrong here. I would never devalue people and the choices that they make. I would wish to offer them compassion and love and a space to just breathe. Let all that expectation go, to see themselves anew as to what living in a city actually might mean for them and their families and their healthy relationships.
Sorry, Emma. I'm just really struck by the power of what you're saying in terms of, you know, it sounds so sort of glib to say less is more, but, you know, that contentment with that contentment and deep connection to the people and place around. And, you know, in the conversation about care came up about, you know, something like a 4-day work week or, you know, some mechanism like that. really what the issue was of how do we have time to care? And I think also what you're saying again is that time and that space, whatever the mechanism for that, it's internal or external, is essential. And in my mind, I have this image of all of us kind of getting rid of a whole lot of crap and this like flood of love coming from you, Emma, at the moment. But that power of what we let in. And I think there's real courage required. What you're saying has been in the chat is radical and revolutionary, and there is courage required to do this. And I think we're reminding ourselves that it's not easy work in the same way it's not easy to rest. That's real work, and real life, I guess. I don't mean work as in the sort of transactional expression of that.
This country, 60,000 years of people living here, we never had jails. We never had concepts of homelessness, never concepts of disability. It's extraordinary to think that we never had jails. Imagine, we can't even begin to think of a life without this. And so we've created all these systems, punishment, when it needs to be about care and compassion, showing people the right way through love. It's
literally disconnecting people from their families and themselves, and it's awful.
And also, just to finish that, and then I'll let you go. I think that's really interesting because it also flips the question I asked, which is, what is the infrastructure we need for care? For connection. And I wonder if actually, thinking about what you've said, Emma, it feels like expansiveness is what we need of space and time to be. And that the question perhaps is, what infrastructure for disconnection do we need to dismantle? They're probably obviously got to have both, but it's really reframed that for me. Thank you for that. Sorry, Jasper.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on disability, and thank you, Emma, for your wisdom and your beautiful perspective. I recently applied for NDIS support, was ready to fight because it's hard to pick up my stuff on a scan or a test, or it's largely anecdotal. But I successfully received funding, and that means I had support for the first time. It's very similar to, I think, what you're talking about, Emma, in that I love my body. I don't see there's anything wrong with my body, my nervous system. I've got a very nervous system, but that's who I am. And it means that I have incredible sensitivity, and that helps me to express myself and to understand and be curious and all these things. But the language that you need to use to get that help is awful. It's not how I see myself. It's not how any disabled person I know sees themselves. The word disabled, it's a ridiculous word anyway. Anyone with a disability will tell you they are incredibly creative to come up with solutions every day to belong and to be part of things. But to get that funding, to get that support, which is what community is about, it's everyone having a fairly level playing field in that we all get to be part of things, and we all receive the care that we need and give the care that we can. You have to talk about your deficits, and you have to talk about your adjusted life score, and all these words that are so disempowering, and so minimizing of our experiences and our hearts and our yearnings and the ways that we love, and connect and matter, even if we are invisible, because we are not in anyone's line of sight, we matter. And we are here. A lot of people are sheltering at home because there are no safe spaces anymore. And these people matter. But I don't think disability should exist. I think everyone should be supported by their communities to belong. Yeah.
Yeah, another one of those things where I'm like, where do we go from a comment like that, Jasper? Like, I mean, I think, yeah, I think that there is so much there, and for people listening or who maybe didn't pick up, I think Jasper, you were talking about that sheltering at home in the context of COVID as no safe spaces, particularly, just to clarify that. I'm aware of the time, and we did promise questions. I don't know if there have been any, Lauren. I've seen lots of great chat, but I can't pick up the questions. Have you got any for us, or do people want to pop questions in the chat? Or
I think there's still room for people to pop questions in the chat, but I can distill a few out from the comments. And the one that I think is interesting to start with is the one that Sienna's just popped in there. Sienna said that Black feminist thinkers Adrienne Marie Brown and Sonia Renee Taylor talk about satisfiability and can we reach satisfaction, particularly where urgency and scarcity mindsets, and I dare say listening to you, Jas, but also deficiency mindsets are the norms of capitalism. And Sienna would love to explore with you what conditions we need to dismantle these and build infrastructures of care and abundance.
If the three of you could just sort that out for us in the next 5 minutes, that'd be great. I believe in you.
I don't want to go first because I just talked for a really long time.
Do you want me to reframe that again? Sienna would love to explore what conditions we need to dismantle these mindsets of scarcity and urgency and build infrastructures of care and abundance.
You know what? Again, I just say let's dial it down a bit. Just you speaking this to people in your workplace, in a meeting. What does this mean to you? What does love look like in our workplace, our home, our community? It's enough. It's enough. You don't have to exert yourself in this, right? Because again, the patriarchy and the Western system requires you to go big and go hard or go home. And sometimes you just have to let people take in an idea and then rest it out. It's a shitty compromise. There's women, there's Aboriginal women, there's whatever women, people. We've got a lot to deal with. Yeah, we've got to, let white men catch up. But you know what? Give yourself a break, because maybe they'll come up with a solution and not you. It's not yours then. Maybe they'll ask you a bit more. Maybe you've created the space for a discussion as opposed to telling someone. And so this is the thing about an Aboriginal culture, is that, uncertainty is valued. What does this mean to have a certainty around these issues? And is that going to be the right track? You might not make a decision, There's a law, and so bring in everyone's perspective. Have you given time for everyone to have a say and a think about that so that everyone feels included? And again, just putting it out there, letting it rest. Sorry, Michelle's off, anyway. Yes, darling Sienna, it is enough. Be gentle on yourself. You've actually done you've done the hard work. You can now talk to people about this. Is that not enough? Don't know. Is that not enough?
I think it's really interesting. These are questions that we ask in our organisation and in our work, because we're funded to do things in the community. And so we need to deliver on those things. And so we're choosing to deliver on those things by having conversations like this to not come up with a solution, but to do this. It's how do you do that? There's so much tension there, and it's just like, look, just go away. Look, we're sorting it. We're just going to be here, and we're going to elicit people's thoughts and feelings and include as many people as we possibly can. And, you know, and sometimes it's not possible because we're human and we have to have rest and we have to have time and space. And so, you know, there's a real interesting place in that to think about, yeah, okay, our organisation is part of the system. How do we shift the system? We have these conversations.
Mm. I'd like to talk about generosity and how do we make it safe to be generous? You know, yeah. If, like an example, our veggie patch has gone bananas and I have more parsley than I could ever use. So I'm going to send a little message to my neighbourhood and say, hey, come and help yourself to parsley if you need some. And not think, well, then if people are in my front yard, they're going to steal something from me. You know, it's how do we make our community safe to be generous? And I think it's just by being generous, and then maybe someone will go, oh, that was really nice to be part of that. I'm going to do that too in my own way. I've got some eggs. Do you guys need eggs? With the whole street together, you can make a quiche, you know. I also want to touch briefly on ecosystems, and I love especially what all the panelists are talking about tonight about really zeroing in on your own neighbourhood, your own backyard. It might feel small, but there are understories and there are microbes they know so much, and if we can just be with them, you never know what you'll pick up. You know, you never know what wonderful things might happen to your mental health, your physical health. You might find a bulb and then you've got a pretty flower and then someone paints a picture. You know, you've got to think about the ripples that can come from such humble simplicity.
Jasper, when you said that about understory, I didn't automatically think plants and bugs. I actually thought about the people in my community who are the understory in my community. So the people who aren't like blossoming on the street loudly, but are in the houses of place, you know, the ones I don't know, so I think that's lovely to think about the understory of people and plants and animal life and fungi and all the different things. Yeah.
I try to nurture my son to be a beautiful person in the hope that there will be less violence in the world later. But these things have ripples that you don't know where they'll end up.
And I think if we don't imagine it, it can't happen. So it's, you know, it's being able to open up to those stories and even listening with generosity, you know, and allowing space and time to have these conversations and to let the flower grow, you know, to have those conversations that mean that boys and girls and people of all genders are able to grow into the flowers that they want to be. And sometimes they're really quiet flowers that are just doing, but they're part of the infrastructure. They're part of the web of the world. You know, they might be behind the veranda, you know, like in that little corner there, you know, that not many people see, and you might step around, or, you know, but it's a really important part of the understory. As much as the trees and you know, that, let's keep going with this metaphor. I'm really happy with this. You know, there's beautiful trees and flowers. I think it's a lovely way of thinking about it.
Lauren, I think that segues nicely into another question you've got there, hey?
It does segue nicely into another question, this idea of imagining being this portal to realising, I suppose. And Nina has posed a great question. Nina's posed a whole lot of great comments as well, so go through that chat. But Nina says, if we live in the ideal world, how would it look like for you? So what would your ideal world, the world of your imagining, look like? It's a big question.
It's a good one.
How long do we have? Oh, I think of really simple things like I want everyone to have enough food to eat of all the different colours there are available.
I don't, you know, I mean, tie yourself up in knots and think of the what ifs. What if those strangers hadn't come in boats? Excuse me. But in the end, love and care for elders, because everything else flows from that.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we could come from we had a world that thought about abundance rather than lack. So continually thinking about what we don't have, and it's that capitalist system that says you must have more, you must look like this, you must. So yeah, so for me, a world where we live in abundance, and we think about, and we stop thinking about deficit, I think that for me would be a beautiful place to be.
I'm sold, or not sold, because it's not a capitalist transaction. Any other questions, Lauren?
There was a question that came through, I think, Millie, to you online before the session.
Oh, yeah.
Someone was asking what is happening, or what needs to happen in regions and regional communities in particular to make them into places that people feel connected and feel that they want to stay in, rather than moving off into perhaps metropolitan areas. And I guess this is a great panel to address that, all being from these disparate regional communities.
You know, I've fallen for that because, you know, consumerism, capitalism, neoliberalism. I am my own entrepreneurial, migratory being who can make profit and, you know, increase economic growth if I just move. Every government policy is directed towards this. This is how pure, you know, I was talking, someone was telling me it is easier to imagine the world exploding tomorrow than a world without capitalism. It does. It is just, honestly, it is so overwhelming at times to think about it. But if we treat ourselves gently first and know what's healthy for us, you know, and it might be in a city, but, you know, I choose to live in a region where I feel like I can connect a little bit more with country. We have to have compassion. And if you have compassion for yourself, you'll take that wherever you live, because country is everywhere. Country doesn't exist as this pristine thing. Country's in the middle of Melbourne, you know, Mansion, Brisbane, you know, it's everywhere. And so we have to care for ourselves first and foremost, to be healthy, to have healthy relationships with country. We have to do that, to be listening so that country can love us right back wherever we are. I don't care where you are. You got to be gentle on yourself and be a little bit fabulous while you're doing it.
Yeah, I think I've just been thinking about something that I've just had a mental blank. One of our wonderful panelists in the care conversation said, I'm seeing her face, said policy is a choice. And, you know, that's what you just said, Emma, you know, everything is telling us to move from regions into the city. If we do that, we'll be more productive units. Well, you know, and just, you know, at the last minute to bring something up that is that may be a bit controversial. You know, I look at, when I'm not going to go into how problematic the Commonwealth Games are, just as a concept, but when we think about the regional Commonwealth Games that are coming here, you know, that's a policy choice that is, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely antithetical to regions. It's meant to bring money into the region, but what it doesn't do is nurture the people in the regions to live better lives. I'd rather spend all that money on local sporting clubs. If you want to spend money on sport, let's do that. You know, like think about this policy choice that we've made. So yeah, I guess to follow on from what Emma was saying, and to think about this is for us to speak up about how we want to live. And there's ways of doing that by even as Emma was saying earlier, opting out. You know, and as Jasper was saying, being generous within your community and connecting. So, you know, we don't buy into the big games, you know, thing, and we spend our time thinking about what connections we could have in our local communities, and we live with generosity in there. And it's hard, it's challenging, and it can be dangerous to be generous, and it can be easier to stay quiet, but there's a choice as well. We're allowed to have moments where we're quiet and where we're not. Absolutely. And we're allowed to have moments where we howl and howl.
I think a dog just walked by on 2 streets away. It's all right, darling.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
It's all right, bub. All right. I think Cool's answered for me. My dog's name is Cool. You're all right, girl. Yeah. What is the question? I'm a bit lost.
No, that's okay. So what's happening, or what needs to happen to make regional communities places where people feel like they belong and want to stay?
Yeah. Oh, I took my, all right, cool. I took my kids to Melbourne recently. I had an ABC interview, and we thought, let's all go in together. We took them on a tram. We took them to the Bot Garden, and it was so weird to me walking down the street in Melbourne, this place I used to live and work, and I didn't know anyone's face, and I'm so used to that now, living in a regional area. I know my community. I know that if I don't know their names, I know their faces, and I have reactions to everyone. I feel warmth towards that person because I know they know that, but you know, that we're all the connections. I think it's getting to know the people that you live with, that are in your surrounding streets. And I think one of the original questions was around things like, what do we do in a flood? And I know that when the flooding was happening in Lismore, I was really scared because I watched that footage and I thought, I can't climb up onto a roof. So being alive in that situation is not accessible to me. And what Emma was saying, we have to adapt. And there is so much push against adapting to how things actually are, as opposed to how a very narrow group of powerful people believe they should be. We need to actually collect information about who we are and what we need. You know, conversations like this and the work you're doing, Millie, that is how we make the region strong and safe and loving.
I'm so sad that we have basically ended our time, but I think the things that you were all just saying, things like regions not as a deficit. There's this real joy and love and generosity and connection to small places that, you know, aren't just about how do we get more cash there. Someone said something that made me think about, you know, what are the systems that we withdraw consent from? Like, I'm actually not going to play in the capitalist. I mean, we have to participate to a certain degree because we're not that we haven't transitioned yet, but we can intellectually draw our consent from that as a driving force. And I think that seems to be coming through, that idea of living with generosity, that point about adapting to how things are, and the enoughness and the stillness. You know, Emma, I'm just going to, I'm going to go and sit outside in the rain after this and just be enough, and that's amazing permission to hear that from somebody. And I think maybe we often don't tell each other that. So there is so much more we could talk about and say, and one day I'm going to meet you all in real life and it's going to be awesome, or in physical life. I wanted to say thank you for this amazing conversation. I had a very crappy interaction before this with the bureaucracy and the disability support pension, supporting a friend of mine to get connected. And it was, an interaction with a sort of robot lawyer, very disconnected from the fact that this person needed care. And to come into this conversation and listen to see the comments, hear the conversation about centering love and acceptance and joy and, the value of the small in our region, is like, I feel really teary. And it's so it's amazing the messiness of that and how life-giving the mess of it is. So huge appreciation to all of you for engaging, and to Emma and Amanda and Jasper for being so generous with the stories and your ideas. And also thank you to Lauren and Irene for doing a lot of the back end work. And also, Women's Health Goulburn Northeast has made this all happen and had their concept and done the work. So I'm so glad I found you. It's such a joy to connect in these ways. So a huge appreciation, and please stay connected with us all. Find those of us who are on Twitter, those of us who just exist off the internet. If you bump into Emma and Bernie, or I can't remember the name of the little place you're from, but I'm sure a little wave will be welcomed, and with each other. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. It's lovely.
Thank you, darling Women's Health. Thank you, darling reMADE. No, thank you.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next time in a month's time. We're talking with Catherine Trebek and Ali Thwaites, I think, and one other yet to be confirmed. So that will be a wonderful conversation. Yeah, hope to see you all there.
Thank you.